Hey everyone, we're just gonna maybe give it a minute while people are signing in. Hope everyone's doing well. So what's going on in the world today?
Always something.
Always
Always.
something. Yeah. Actually, I want to test something because I've had an issue the last maybe two presentations ago. For those who are all just signing in right now, I just want to test if the chat's working. Could you all just put in the chat like, are you parents of class of 26 or 27? You know, like where are we at here? I'm just curious. Okay, hey, chat's working
It
and a lot of
works really
26s.
well.
All right, this is good.
Yeah.
Ooh, someone's couple. I saw 28 in there. Good, good early planning. Many
Many years.
years. Excellent. All right, but definitely it sounds like an overwhelming majority are class of 2026, and we got some what I'm going to call like early planners, which I appreciate all that. Excellent. Um, and oh, someone is already using the Q&A. I love this, so I'll just mention this too. Even though I just asked you to put stuff in the chat because I was curious if it's working. But when you do have questions, I admittedly get lost in the chat, and I probably will never see your question. But so if you do have a question, my two rules, if rules is a hard word, but my one rule is
Sounds
put it in the
strict.
Q&A. Second rule is ask all the questions while I'm talking so Kevin has to answer
Put me to work.
them. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. No, I'm kidding. On the second rule anyway. But but yeah, that helps immensely is if you can put the questions in the Q&A spot. And I'll just uh answer that question too. I know Kevin already I think did, but
Yep.
We are recording this, and possibly later tonight, or if not tomorrow, you'll get access to the recording. So if you're trying to write down all the notes and go, what did he say? What did he say? Don't worry about it. You will get a recording. Okay.
But still take notes.
It's always good to take notes,
Yeah.
yes, but don't freak out. Like like what did you say? All right. Hey Kevin, question for you.
Yes.
Did you know that we are now less than 100 days away until juniors can start submitting their college applications?
I have to admit, I did not know that.
Did any of the parents who have juniors, did you know that we're that close? We are less than 100 days away, technically, from when students can submit their applications. Yeah. All right. We're on it. Good, 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 good. How many of you are starting to freak out a little bit? You can use the emojis too if you want. But yeah, we're less than 100 days away now. So I'm just going to share the screen real quick and just let's get into what I want to talk about is related to scholarships and which ties into admissions, to be honest. So I'm going to kind of integrate the two, if you will. So let me share my screen. All right. Kevin, can you see my screen here?
It looks perfect.
All right. So let's just talk about this. These days, getting into a great college and earning scholarships, that takes more than just perfect grades, more than leadership roles, more than taking college courses, more than landing great internships. Think of those things as the starting point, not the finish line. What truly makes a student stand out is going to be their well-crafted, authentic story, how they portray themselves on the application. And this story should be one that shows initiative. It should show deep interdisciplinary engagement. It should show a clear sense of purpose. Colleges are looking for students who go beyond the basic rubrics that are published in the Common Data Set. They want to see how your child has taken those interests and turn them into something meaningful, whether that's through community involvement, conducting original research, maybe starting an initiative, or collaborating with others to solve a problem that matters to them. And in today's connected world and the technology we have, students have more tools than ever to make this kind of impact. And the ones who rise to the top, both for admissions and scholarships, these are the students who are thinking bigger, they're acting boldly, they align everything that they do around their personal mission statement. And that's what we're going to talk about today: how to strategically position yourself not only to get into college, but to get paid to go. Now, in case this is the first time you're listening to a webinar from College Aid Pro, I always like to say we're on a mission. I'm old enough, and I'm sure some of others here are old enough to remember Blues Brothers. So I like to say we're on a mission from God. But we are trying to really end the student loan crisis. And to do that, we feel like we have to empower families to be smarter shoppers when it comes to college. I might even take it a step further and say, I am trying to transform the way families think about and plan for college. And that's kind of maybe my personal mission, if you will. Before I go into anything, Kevin, you want to just say hi real quick, introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Kevin Murphy. I'm one of the experts here at College Aid Pro, and yeah, I'm excited to go through this tonight with you guys. That's enough about me.
Very humble.
Very, very short. Very, very short. Pass it off to you.
All right. And I'm JP. I used to joke that I'm nicknamed Santa Claus of college planning because of my beard. But after turning 50, I think it's because I'm also starting to look like Santa Claus. So anyway, I've been doing this for, a couple decades and helping families. I started this kind of in this field working in the financial aid office at the University of Southern California. And I spent 18 years in higher education and all that. But anyway, yeah, Kevin is one of our great phenomenal pros. We have a whole team of wonderful experts at College Aid Pro, and it's such a wonderful collaboration of pros sharing their insights, sharing their wisdom with each other. It's just a great organization to be part of. And if you guys are following us or anything like that, like you're tapping into some high level expert stuff. So anyway, let's just kind of get into this now. I know Jeffrey Selingo. I hope we probably all have heard Jeffrey Selingo's name, but he talks about schools. He likes to call them being, a buyer or a seller. Admittedly, I like the intent behind what he's trying to do. And, you can go buy his book, or you could go to his website and buy his buyer seller list. But admittedly, in the end, all you're buying is generic info. And that's info you can easily Google yourself. Unfortunately, that generic info doesn't necessarily apply to you or in your specific situation. So if you want to know what's going to be true for you, I'm going to tell you where you should really begin at. And that is going to be with College Aid Pro and our software we call MyCap. And I think let's put it in the chat real quick. Let me try to find the chat here. I'm going to send you this link. And
I could also drop it in if you'd like.
What's that?
Well, do you have it, or do you need me to drop it in?
I got it here.
Okay.
I just had to put it in there. So I'm going to highly recommend, if you don't have an account yet with College Aid Pro, the MyCap software, if you will, do so. Like, create it now. Even if listen to me as you do this. But I just put the link in the chat. I'm just going to quickly slide over what it looks like, if you will. And this is not anybody's real sensitive information. This is just my account, if you will. But the point I just want to share here with you is, when you set up your account with MyCap and you go to the profile, and under this personal info section, you're going to put in your child's academic information, GPA, test scores, rank, all that stuff. You're going to put in your financial information, all that. Okay, fine. Kevin will talk later about like the SAI and all the calculations behind the scenes and such. I don't care about it for now. All I care about is what are these schools going to cost me? And you'll see I have three sample schools here: Chapman, UCLA, and University of Pennsylvania. And you'll see their sticker prices, right? But below that, you're going to see what we project the net cost to be. And it's like, wow, in my scenario, Chapman might be about half off. And it's like, well, why? If I click the more info, it's telling me, oh, I'm probably going to get a scholarship. That's good to know. I need to know that. And I want to know what do I need to do to make sure I really do get that, right? I go to UCLA and I'm like, I'm not getting anything. I'm paying full freight, but it's a low price to begin with. That's okay. And then UPenn, highest sticker price. Normally at that sticker price and even Chapman's sticker price, I'd be like, oh heck no, son, you're not applying there. I can't afford that. But when I see that, I'm going, oh heck yeah, you're applying there. Let's do that. And again, why am I getting it such a good price? The system's telling me I'm going to probably qualify for a lot of grant money. Again, I don't care whether I got scholarships or grants. I just want the free money. Get the bring that sticker price down. That's all I care about. So that's just my super quick overview of why I love the MyCap software. It's going to tell you what's true for you. Okay. So no more just generic information. No more like, oh, my friend said, or I read this. No, put your information in there. Find out what's true for you. Okay, let's go on. So before we really dive into the scholarships, I feel compelled. I need to kind of provide some framework of how I approach this process, because honestly, I find most families approach this process of planning for college, admittedly, completely backwards. So before I'm going to dive into the strategies, let's just kind of go through this very pragmatic, not fancy, but it's very effective framework that I use to help my families have consistent success year after year after year. So if you follow this framework, hopefully you won't make all the same mistakes as all the other families who kind of DIY this process. So visualize a funnel, if you will, a funnel system. And I'm going to start with all the possible colleges to choose from. And then I'm going to narrow it down by what I'm going to call academic fit. This is going to be what I call a must-have. If the school doesn't have like the degree you want to study, shouldn't be on my list, right? That should be obvious, but it's not always. Whatever schools that make it through this first filter, this academic filter, then I'm going to narrow them down by which schools are a financial fit. This is another must-have, okay? After I've gone through these two filters, I'm always trying to find a list ultimately of about 25 to 30 schools that I hand to my students. And I say, hey, you can now narrow it down based upon your personal fit criteria. Okay. And I can kind of butt out at this stage because I know I handed them a list of the two must-haves. It must have been it must have be an academic fit. It needs to be a financial fit. I feel good with what I'm giving them as choices. And so I hand them this list and I go, look, you're the one who's going to be at college for for those 4 years. This is going to be your experience. So I value and I acknowledge that their wants, their personal fit criteria are important and it's their choice, not mine. You're not even the parents, right? It's their choice. Now, I want to use an analogy here to help. Maybe I think this analogy will help drive it home. Let's compare this college funnel, this process of narrowing schools down, this funnel to what it's like when you are going to buy a car for your child when they turn 16, going to get that first car. The academic fit in this instance would be, hey, I want that car to be safe. I want it to be reliable, well built. In essence, I want it to safely transport my child from point A to point B. Okay. That's the academic fit. Then the financial fit. I think this is self-explanatory, but if I cannot afford $400,000 for a car, I shouldn't be showing my kid a Rolls Royce or a Ferrari or an Aston Martin. Because if I take my kid to those dealerships, and say, hey, let's test drive these cars and, and all that. When they turn 16, can you guess what car they're going to buy? I mean, I would have picked the Aston Martin in a heartbeat. So if I can't afford it, I shouldn't show them that. If my budget is for a car is $100,000, it would be so much better to just take them to those cars, show them those cars, take them to those dealerships, and let them see those cars, if you will. Because if I don't, I'm setting them up for disappointment, or and this is the knee-jerk reaction of most parents. I'm going to feel super guilty, and I'm going to say I'm going to do whatever it takes to make my baby's dream come true. In other words, I'm going to overspend and go into way too much debt. So let me be clear. If you cannot afford that $400,000 car, if you know your budget's $100,000, show them those cars that fit that budget. They're not going to know any different. They're going to be just as excited to shop for those cars on that list. It's just a matter of setting the expectations early. Now, in order to do that, you have to plan early. Okay. And again, this is where that College A Pro software can really help. But in the end, once that child narrows down that school list, now I'm going back to the school list. When they narrow down that the school list to their top 10, let's say, their favorite schools, then we craft an admission strategy for that school, or for those schools, I should say. Now, many families don't realize the strong correlation between what colleges look for in prospective students and what scholarship committees are looking for as well. What I'm going to show you is the basic strategies that I have my students focus on when it comes to admissions. And these strategies can significantly help when it comes to winning scholarships. Now, you're going to see here about 9 different categories. And I'll just generically, or broad brushstrokes, I'm going to tell you, I label anything related to academics as a defensive strategy. It's important to have a strong defense, but it's also important to have a strong offensive strategy. And this is what usually gets overlooked. Now, I think maybe just to explain it in a slightly different way, or to maybe help drive it home. When I'm trying to improve someone's chances of getting admitted and winning scholarships, these are going to be the basic, areas that I'm focusing on. So I just want to dive into each one. Let's start with academic excellence. Ideally, that the student's GPA and test score should be above the 75th percentile of incoming freshmen. AP test score should be 4s and 5s. Obviously, the more 5s, the better. And this is true even if a college says they are test optional. All the data out there shows colleges prefer students who submit test scores. In fact, I find that the stronger the student is academically, the better the need-based financial aid tends to be. And that's something Kevin will talk about later, but I find that schools are more generous with their grant money, even for the schools, for those students who just have better grades, if you will. Even the colleges that claim to be test blind, I'm going to say really are not. I'm going to use I live out in California, so I'm going to use the UC system as an example. The UCs say they are test blind. All that means is that they don't take into account the SAT or ACT test scores, but they heavily rely on AP test scores. So I'm going to tell you, it's a falsity to think test scores don't matter. Even class rank is important. And nowadays, it's very rare for a school to ever tell you what, every student's class, where their rank is. A lot of counselors don't even know that it's in their system, but they'll say, oh, we don't track it. Yes, they do. They just don't know it. But it's important because sometimes if you're applying to very selective schools, your biggest competitor is your fellow classmate, and it's your class rank that might make the difference. Let's talk about extracurricular activities. Your extracurricular activities need to demonstrate intellectual curiosity. They need to show that you took initiative. They need to show that you made an impact. Notice I don't say anything about leadership. Leadership is nice, but admittedly, it's overplayed. It's kind of lost a little bit of value. Most students mess up this section of their application because they usually just share the bland stuff, such as sports, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, high school clubs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Also, psychologically speaking, the order of your activities matters as well. It's all about the impression you leave on the person who's reading that application. And I'm going to give you an example. I helped a student a couple of years back with his application, and on his application, he listed 7 extracurricular activities all about swimming. In fact, even his personal statement talked about swimming. None of his activities talked or reflected, I should say, any sort of intellectual curiosity about computer engineering, which is what he was going to major in. So by the time I finished fixing his application, only 3 of those extracurricular activities talked about swimming. I realigned the other 7 activities to either be in alignment with his choice of major, or we showed how they demonstrated intellectual curiosity. They demonstrated the impact he made with those activities. We also reworked his personal statement to talk about where this, desire to get into computer engineering came from, which was his relationship with his grandfather. Anyway, admittedly, he didn't want to use my version of his application, right? And his parents were like, "Son, you need to listen to JP." And he was, I won't say stubborn, but he was a little stubborn. He thought he knew best. So I made an agreement with him, and I said, okay, he had like 15 schools. I said, you pick 3 schools that you want to send your application to. Let's send them early. Pick 3 different schools, and you can send my version of your application to. And we sent those early. And then depending on how that plays out, you can apply to the remaining schools' regular decision. His 3 schools that he did his application, his version of the application, he got rejected from all of them. My 3 schools, he got accepted to all of them. So the remaining schools, we obviously use my version of his application. Now, but let this sink in. The student had the same defensive strategy throughout the whole process, meaning his grades were all the same, his test scores were all the same. All of that was the same. All that changed was really the offensive strategy, or really how we presented his application, how we presented his story. Okay. And that's what's really what a lot of everyone kind of forgets. This is your chance to sell yourself. And so you got to do it right. And that's kind of ties into now what I'm going to call personal brand. And I personally don't like this term. I think it's a little too marketing gimmicky, but I'm old school. I like to say this is, knowing your genuine, authentic self and being able to successfully convey it in your application. So certainly, again, you want to convey it in that personal statement, or whatever essay you're writing. It could be the UCPIQs, it could be a supplemental essay, whatever it is. It's very important to understand what is the theme that you're trying to convey, and then ultimately pick that. If we're dealing with the Common App, pick the prompt that allows you to share that theme the best. Okay. Now, in addition to the essay, most students overlook what will their letters of recommendation say. So, does the teacher just simply, or the counselor just simply write, I enjoyed this student in my class. He or she was a great student, all the normal stuff. Admittedly, that's a pretty boring, bland letter of recommendation. That's what they always say. You want a letter of recommendation, though, that is going to share real insight about your child. It should talk about their character. It should talk about their intellectual curiosity, so on and so forth. The theme of whatever your application is, that the story that you're telling, basically you want the theme of that letter of recommendation that should reinforce or complement the theme of your student's story, if you will, their personal brand. And I will say, in order to elicit that kind of letter of recommendation, it takes time. You need to develop strong relationships with the teacher or the counselor. And so that's not something you can just, show up to their office one day, like in September of their senior year and say, "Hey, first time meeting me, can you write a letter of recommendation?" Like, again, this takes time. You want to cultivate that relationship with them, and obviously you can't force them to write anything, but you're trying to influence it as much as you can. Because again, this is, doing all of this, planning ahead, taking the time to do all these steps. This is what allows, the students we coach anyway, I'd say have some of the most success, and they're the ones that are securing not only admissions but also securing the scholarships. Now, I'm going to give just a couple other thoughts, if you will, a couple other tips. Partly because one of our other team members loves these, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, I wish I would have known this stuff." So anyway, uh, these next things I think are overlooked, maybe underestimated, but they can be very, very effective. First one, strategic networking with the college admissions officers. I'm going to say you don't have to, and really don't do this. Don't email them like every week with questions, especially if you can easily find the answers on the school's website. That's not networking. That's annoying. But demonstrating genuine interest in the school, that's where the magic happens. Now, here's what I mean. When a student takes the time to attend, let's say, a virtual info session or visit the campus, then go ask a thoughtful question during Q&A, or send a follow-up email after a meet and greet if they come to your high school. This is what can show initiative. It shows interest. Colleges track this, okay? It's not, just about being on their radar. It's about making a favorable impression so that when, your child's name comes up on a committee, it helps if that admissions counselor already remembers them as being, that student who, reached out with a thank you or reached out with some great questions or saw something about in the news and they followed up with them. Like, anytime that they're showing that they make that kind of initiative and they're that vested in the school, you're leaving a positive impression with the admissions officer. So I always encourage my students to, work, be, when they reach out to be professional about it, but be authentic. Like, don't make it feel like you're trying to just kiss up and say, "Hey, I want to be admitted someday." Like, they'll see that, but authentic conversations, reach out with purpose. I'm all about purpose, if you will. And again, be respectful of their time. So not bugging them every week and things like that. Second, deadlines. Every school has different deadlines. In fact, one school can have different internal deadlines, meaning they could have one deadline in general for admissions. Actually, the admissions, there could be multiple deadlines. There could be, early decision, early action, regular decision, all that stuff. Just different decisions, deadlines for admissions. But they can even have a different deadline if you want to be considered for scholarships. The key is to research each school's deadline and keep track of it. I recommend using a spreadsheet to just keep everything organized in one spot and then stay on top of it. Use calendar reminders or whatever tricks you need so you don't miss a deadline. And then last, I want to share this tip. You can potentially appeal a scholarship decision. Technically, it can be done. But I want to kind of nuance that. If a college has decided to award no scholarship, I find it nearly impossible to win an appeal. It's rare, it might happen, but I'd say it's limited because maybe there was a genuine mistake, or there was a significant relevant information that was missing on the application. But I'm just going to say, generally speaking, going from zero to successfully appealing a scholarship is going to be extremely rare. However, let's say you were awarded some scholarship, then there is a chance that you may be able to convince them to award you some more. It obviously depends on your circumstances, but I've helped students win an additional $3,000, $5,000, $8,000. Yeah, just last week, I had a student who was awarded $11,000 scholarship. According to school, that was their max was 12. We did an appeal. they got an extra 8. So much for the 12 being their max, right? Basically increase their scholarship by 75%. Um, and that's every year. I mean, that adds up pretty quick. So just remember, appealing might be an option available to you. Okay. Now, that's the bulk of what I want to cover. So just to recap, I cannot stress enough the importance of planning early. I cannot stress enough the importance of reframing how you shop or plan or pick colleges. Again, we're less than 100 days away for juniors to start submitting these applications. So this is stuff you should be doing right now. Remember, maximizing your scholarship potential is directly tied to your college admissions strategy. You want to have both this defensive and offensive approach. Every step taken to enhance your admissions prospects also can improve your scholarship eligibility. And I'm talking both, scholarships from colleges themselves and even private scholarships, the private resources. So I want you to really sit down, map it out from here to, even if you're sophomores or freshmen, map it out, create a plan that is going to be strategic and that's going to help you stay consistent with the theme. Think about, like, again, what's personal brand, their genuine, authentic self. What's the story? You want to make sure all parts of that application are telling a coherent, consistent story. Obviously, stay organized. If you do all of these things, this is what's going to help you achieve, or help your child anyway, achieve their highest potential. And I'm pretty sure that's what you want for your child. I'm a parent, and I know that's what I want for my son. And I want him to achieve his absolute highest potential. Not my dream, but his dream. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin. Let him talk about need-based financial aid, and that's something to just in case you don't qualify for merit aid, maybe you got it. Maybe that's an option for you, is need-based aid. So I'll let Kevin talk about all that.
Oh, thank you, JP. We have a couple of questions in the Q&A that I purposely left for you. So
I'll get you back. No, I'm kidding.
well, no, some of them even asked specifically for you.
Okay, fair enough.
But all right, let me share my screen. One sec. Does it look good on your end? Can you see? All right, perfect. So need-based financial aid is completely separate from merit aid, right? JP just spent a lot of time talking about scholarships and admissions. Need-based financial aid, it's based on your income, your student's income, your assets, your student's assets. Now, I'd say this is, and JP, I think you would agree, to navigate this part of the process successfully, every family needs to understand this formula. How much financial aid, need-based financial aid, will you be eligible for? It's based on what's currently on the screen, which is the full cost of attendance. And that's the entire sticker price at a college. So that's tuition, fees, room, board, books, personal expenses, even an estimate for transportation, minus your student aid index. And your student aid index, it's a number that, based on your income, your assets, and the information that's provided in the financial aid forms, is used to determine your financial aid eligibility. The difference between those two equals your demonstrated need, right? So COA, cost of attendance, minus your student aid index equals your family's demonstrated need. Essentially, that's how much financial aid you can get. It does not mean that's how much the colleges will give you. Then it's up to the colleges to give you, some of that, all of that, none of that. It really varies from school to school, and that's one of the tricky parts of figuring out how much need-based aid you'll get. And that also is in my cap, and we'll go into that in a minute. Now, what's included in your SAI and what should you know about it? So let's start off with assets. What is considered an asset? Pretty much everything but retirement accounts. So your 401ks, your IRAs, cash value life insurance, annuities, all of that's excluded. What is included? Cash, checking, savings, investments, even investment properties and so forth. All of that is included in the calculation. Now, when you fill out the FAFSA, when you fill out the CSS profile, you are supposed to enter the information at the time of filing, right? So what is everything worth at that minute in time on that day? Not, we just don't want to confuse it with the base year, which is your tax return that's used for financial aid. And unfortunately, the FAFSA, the CSS profile, they do not ask about debt, right? So there's no question on the FAFSA that says, tell us how much credit card debt you have. But with the right planning, there's usually a good way to incorporate that. Now, in terms of parent assets versus student assets, parent assets are assessed at around 5.64% versus student assets, which are assessed at 20%. That's a significant difference. Your students' assets count at nearly 4 times as much as your assets. So obviously, if there was money in your student's account versus money being in your account, there's usually a really good planning opportunity ahead of filing the financial aid forms to do what's right, to position yourself to qualify for as much aid as possible. Now, parent assets, as I've mentioned, are factored at that reduced rate. Grandparent 529s, those are not counted. Sibling 529s are no longer included on the FAFSA. Those are additional planning opportunities that we discuss with clients where you usually have the opportunity to position assets, to maybe shift some things around to qualify for as much aid as possible. If your student has a UGMA or a UTMA account, unfortunately, that is considered a student asset. So that means that it would be assessed at 20%. Parent-owned 529. So if you own a 529 for your student, and the student whose FAFSA you're filing is the beneficiary, that goes on the forms. Also, jointly owned accounts, our position is that, if you have a shared account, maybe with your student, you can include that as your asset, not the student's asset. And lastly would be real estate. And this is a tricky one. And I'd say that when it comes to reporting real estate on the FAFSA, it's one of the biggest areas I see families make a mistake because the question itself is confusing. It literally says including real estate. However, and when you're reporting the total of investments, however, underneath it in fine print, it literally says not the house you live in. It's just if you miss that fine print, you will accidentally include it. So that being said, on the FAFSA, your primary residence is not included. However, any additional properties, so think of maybe you have a beach house or an investment property or a rental, the equity, so the value minus the debt, would be included. And that's also when it comes to real estate, there's always a big opportunity to, strategically value the real estate as low as you can to make sure that you obviously are not over reporting any equity. Now, a minute ago, I had mentioned your base year. So what income do the colleges consider? And we like to say the prior year, which might be a little bit confusing. So for anyone on tonight's call who has a 2026 grad, the 2024 tax return would be used. So the tax return that you just filed maybe 10 or so days ago, that will be used for your junior. If you're currently on the call and you have a sophomore, 2027 grad, your 2025 tax return will be the base year. And if you currently have a freshman, 2028 grad, your 2026 tax return, so next year, that will be used to file your students' financial aid forms. This is also a big planning opportunity if you have younger children, right? If you do have a 2028 grad, there's usually an opportunity to look over the tax returns and see if there's anything that can be done shift anything that can be shifted. But if you have a 2026 grad, that tax year has passed, but the tax year has passed. But as I just said, the assets rise the day you file the forms, so there's still an opportunity there. Now, the primary income that the colleges are looking at is line 11 on your tax return. Line 11 on your federal 1040 is your adjusted gross income. And students are allowed to earn $11,510, and that not get counted against them for the sake of financial aid on the FAFSA. So that's for 2025, 2026 school year. Every year that goes up a little bit, right? So your student can earn a little bit more maybe next year, a little bit more the year after, and it not count against you for financial aid on the FAFSA. Okay. Now, when it comes to applying for financial aid, it's important that you understand that every single school has a different methodology that they use. No two schools are alike, and they're all going to award aid and look at your information a little bit differently. They even have different deadlines. So it can be a little bit difficult to track. The spreadsheet that JP mentioned is a great way that if you are going to be tracking deadlines to at least get some of that information on there. But unfortunately, there's no one size fits all for this process. Now, almost every college requires that you submit the FAFSA for obviously need-based aid. And also some colleges require the FAFSA for merit scholarships. I also want to say, and it's not on the slide, but I've seen over the years that submitting the financial aid forms, even if you don't qualify for any financial aid, can help with the appeals process as well. We see a lot of families get basically goodwill financial aid and they don't have any demonstrated need, but they submitted the forms and the financial aid office is willing to help out a little bit. Now, there's an additional financial aid form above and beyond the FAFSA called the CSS profile. And many private colleges and a few public schools require this form. It's an additional financial aid form, so you'd have to submit the FAFSA plus the CSS profile. And then some schools, Princeton, University of Chicago, some others, have their own institutional forms. So it's basically their own financial aid form for the school, and that's in addition to the FAFSA. When it comes to financial aid deadlines and obviously admissions deadlines, you don't want to miss them. They are extremely important. They could literally cost you getting aid or admissions. And again, there's no one size fits all. So it is your responsibility to track the deadlines, to make sure nothing's missed, to stay up to date. Have your student check their emails, their portals, etc. And typically speaking, that's the way the colleges communicate with the students. They communicate through the portals and via email. Now, the FAFSA is completed on studentaid.gov, and it will go live hopefully October 1st this year. So every October 1st, senior year for a student, that's when the FAFSA can be submitted. As I mentioned, the prior year is the base income year. And one thing that's really tricky with the FAFSA is in a divorce situation, who files the FAFSA, right? So the custodial parent submits the form, as oftentimes the custodial parent is the one who provides the most financial support. That's how we view it, but it is important to keep in mind who provided the most support the 12 months leading up to the form being filed. Now, if you haven't done this already, and I don't imagine many people have, but if you haven't created a FAFSA account, you absolutely can. You will need an account as a parent. You can also have your spouse create an account as well. And then your student will also need an account, right? So there's going to be a student account and a parent account, and that is how the form is submitted. And you'll get a username, a password, a backup code, challenge questions, you name it. So might as well get a jump start on that, especially if you have a junior. Now, the CSS profile, that too should open October 1st of your student's senior year. Around somewhere around 250 colleges require the form. Many of the really competitive private schools, the selective private schools, expensive private schools, but also a few public schools like University of Virginia, University of Michigan. Trying to think which UNC Chapel Hill, they all require the CSS profile. Now, the FAFSA, only one parent in a divorced household files the FAFSA. The CSS profile, that may not be the case. Many of the schools that use the CSS profile require an additional form called the non-custodial profile. It's essentially a CSS profile for the non-custodial household. There are a lot more questions on the CSS profile. So naturally, the schools that are using the CSS profile are typically awarding more of their own institutional aid, which is why they're asking more questions. But if you own a business, if you're a divorced household, there's going to be more questions for your family. The non-custodial profile might be one. For business owners, they're asking for some tax information from your business. They're asking for some other information. So there's opportunity in these situations to plan properly and to be strategic to qualify for more aid. Now, in a divorce situation or just in a situation where there's a non-custodial parent, let's just say that for some reason it's unsafe to contact them, or they can't be contacted. There is a waiver for that. The non-custodial waiver is a way that, with very specific reasons, you can get that requirement removed in terms of submitting that other household information. To get into the CSS profile, you log in using your student's College Board credentials. So the same credentials that they would use to register for the PSAT and the SAT. And as I've already mentioned, way more invasive than the FAFSA, way more in terms of questions than the FAFSA. So JP, you're probably the one who should speak to this slide, unless you'd like me to. But I think early decision, early action, and regular decision, I don't know. I feel like from a financial aid perspective, yes, there's some implications. Absolutely. Early decision, you can lose some leverage. Appeals are a little bit tougher. Early action, I think is beneficial from a financial aid perspective. And at least you're making those deadlines so you're not missing out on scholarships. And regular decision is the regular deadline. But I think from an admissions perspective, I don't know if you want to speak to increased odds with admissions or anything like that.
Yeah, I'll say this is arguably one of the most complex topics that everyone gets wrong because they way oversimplify it or they misunderstand the data. Because as Kevin's kind of alluded to, there's multiple things potentially happening here. Just to give you an idea, for example, let's talk about need-based aid. In general, we might like applying early action or regular decision and not early decision, because we like the idea of being able to wait and get competing offer letters and maybe leverage and all that stuff. And again, that's a general statement. But there are schools out there, University of Puget Sound is one of them, who says we will award 100% of need-based aid to those who apply early decision. And those who apply to the later application deadlines are going to get less percentage of the financial aid. So in that school's case, you kind of want to apply for early decision if you want to get the most of need-based aid. Okay. What if we're talking about admissions? I'm sorry, let's not talk about it. Let's talk about scholarships. There are some schools, I won't out them in this setting, but there are some schools who admit that you are less likely to get a scholarship if you apply early decision. You're more likely to get a scholarship if you apply regular decision. Okay, that's not cool. And then there's schools like my USC that, basically the deadline to be considered for their scholarships is the early action deadline. Every school's different. That's why it's impossible to make a general statement. Yeah. It's literally, like I said, if I get my list down to like my top 10 with my students and we're really coming up with all the admission strategies, This is one of those strategies we have to talk about, and we have to customize it school by school by school. Um, the final thing I'll talk about is just again a blanket statement about like, well, does it improve my chances? A lot of people think I have a higher chance of getting admitted if we apply like early decision, because when you just look at face value the data, it might seem like that. Yes and no. And here's why I'm just going to I'll make this statement. I'm not saying this is true for our audience, but I have talked to parents who are like, oh, you know what? My child's grades are below the 25th percentile. My child's test scores are below the 25th percentile. They don't have a good defensive strategy, nor do they have maybe the most exciting offensive strategy. But we see that there's a higher percent get admitted early, so we're going to apply early. And I'm like, you still have 0% chance. Admissions doesn't lower their standards for early. So like it's not helping. Now, if you got everything firing on and you got your strategies all lined up and everything's working great, then maybe. All right. Tulane, like if you want to get admitted to Tulane, you have to apply early.
Yeah.
You're not getting admitted basically if you apply regular. Right. So again, this is one of those really impossible topics to make a generalized statement, because for every generalized statement, I will come up with a counter. So it really have to customize it school by school by school.
Yeah, it's like a very loaded question, and it is definitely difficult to kind of generalize this, but I'd say there's benefits to all of it.
Yeah. And again, it's going to come down to the school.
Yeah. But I wanted your take. If anyone hasn't realized this on the presentation, I only do the financial aid process, whereas JP, he's an admissions expert and a financial aid expert. So you're in really good company tonight with his help.
It helps to have worked in that industry for 18 years. Traveled on trains, planes, and automobiles with admissions as they complain about or exude whatever kids they just met.
Absolutely. You know what I realized? I never spent time going into my cap, so I'm going to do that right now. So JP showed my cap earlier in the presentation, and just briefly went through the impact and scholarships and all that. But I want to just point out how we talked about cost of attendance minus student aid index equals your family's financial need. What you'll notice here is we have your student aid index, right? So we have your federal student aid index, which is the FAFSA number. And then we have your institutional student aid index, which is the CSS profile number. You'll see that there's a range on the institutional side. And the reason why it goes from 38 to 44 is because of home equity. Now, take a look at these numbers here for particularly Boston College. Net cost $62,750, whereas the sticker price is $97,000. Boston College is definitely a school when it comes to appeals and all of that. We know that they under award. We've had great success this year, I think in previous years as well. But take a look at that $62,750, and then look here at University of Pennsylvania. Similar cost, right? $92,000 a year. The net cost is $40,556. The reason that net cost is so much lower is because they actually are basically getting you to this SAI, right? And they use the institutional, they use the CSS profile, so it's lower than that federal number. Oops, I got logged out. Give me 1 second. Oops, all right. Go back here. Do you see it on your end? All right. So one more time, take one look at those numbers. University of Pennsylvania, 40,000, Boston College, 62,000, right? All of that is based on the information in this profile. But by the way, this is just a test account. This isn't even mine. This is a colleague of ours. I want to give Dan some credit here. But you can see here, right? Adjusted gross income, 275,000. Parent non-retirement savings, 150,000. Home equity, 225,000. So we had Penn at 40. Now let's just say by strategic valuations, understanding what can be shifted, positioning assets, valuing home equity. Let's just say hypothetically you're able to get this 150 down to, I don't know, 100, and home equity from 225 down to 150. Well, look what's going to happen to those numbers, right? So now Penn should be, I don't know why it's not less, but you can see Boston College is less here, right? So Boston College was in the 60s and now it's 59,000 a year. So just by strategically moving a few things around and strategically positioning a few things, you could qualify for thousands more per year in financial aid. So you definitely want to take those steps if they're possible. They're not possible for every family, right? There are some families where that is not the case and there's no opportunity to do that. But we see a lot of families do have the opportunity, whether it be home equity or whether it be non-retirement assets, to make a few adjustments to qualify for as much aid as they possibly can. But that's all I wanted to show here in the software. So let me get that out of the way. And then the last thing on the schedule for tonight is appeals. And that is what we are, that is what we are currently wrapping up for our clients, right? So you have the ability to appeal a financial aid package. You can appeal need-based grants, and you can obviously appeal merit scholarships, as JP mentioned earlier, the success he's had this year. When you're appealing for need-based grants or merit scholarships, it's important to share color, right? To actually paint a picture, make a compassionate plea, be personal. If you know, hey, I should have gotten $2,000 more. Maybe you used MyCap in our software and you saw that the cost projection's off, or maybe you saw a scholarship on their website that was slightly more. You can ask for that specific amount of aid. If you're leveraging competing offers, a lower cost at a different school because they gave you a larger scholarship, you absolutely need to show them. You can't just say, hey, I got a better offer from another school. You have to show that to the college where you're appealing. The financial aid forms are based on your tax information, and they're based on the asset information you report. But there's a lot of families that have expenses, whether it be medical, whether it be elder care, support of other family members. Those are not reflected anywhere on your tax return. So this is a good opportunity to actually bring that up with the college on an appeal. I'd say one thing is for sure, and Matt and I did a presentation earlier, JP, where we were like, the theme this year might be 2 or 3 appeals. But be persistent. You might have to go back. You might have to push your case. Continue to demonstrate interest, right? It's the top choice. It's the dream school. And it doesn't hurt to let your student lead the charge, right? It doesn't hurt to let them be the one who's actually reaching out, who's doing a lot of the correspondence. Don't have a slide for this, but we've had incredible appeal results this year. And since we have a few minutes, I'm just going to mention a few. Like this year, just today, 4,000 more from American in scholarships, 9,000 more from Santa Clara, 9,000 from Wake Forest and grants, 5,000 from Syracuse, 8,000 from Franklin and Marshall, 4,500 from Embry-Riddle, 4,000 from RPI, 7,400 from NYU, $73,930 from Colby, 8,000 from Penn, 12,500 from Wesleyan. In total this year on appeals, we've helped families secure over the 4 years almost $4 million. It's significant, that opportunity to appeal. So to be exact, $3,928,335.96. So that is absolutely something that we leverage with the families that work with us, and we really try and make sure that they get every dollar they possibly can from the colleges. But all right, so that's enough from me. Once again, our mission here is obviously to help families to basically flip how families shop for college on its head, right? No, we'll figure it out if you get in. More, let's make sure you're applying to colleges that we can actually afford. Now, I think, let me stop sharing. JP, is there anything you want to add? I know we're going to go over a few more things, but oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
I guess all I can say is I'm trying to keep up with some of the Q&A. Admittedly, some folks have like very specific questions.
Yeah.
Truthfully, I can't answer specific questions without like knowing more detail. It's not that I'm not trying to ignore you. It's just there's just no way in in the next minute or two that I can say, hey, I need to see this, and that. So for those who have like super specific questions, the best advice I'm going to give you, I put it in the link. I'll put it in the chat. And in fact, I'll give it a. Let me do this. I'll put this in the chat. If you got think you got a complex situation, maybe you got assets. That those assets could be real estate, it could be business, whatever. Book a consult. I think it's fair to say, in that 15 minutes, if you're like, hey, I'm the kind of guy that DIYs this. I'm the guy that watches HGTV and then looks at my wife and says, baby, let's remodel that bathroom. He's the type that says, oh, hell no. We went through that. I remodeled a house after we got married and literally finished a month before our baby was born. She's like, I'm not going through that again. Anyway, I'm the type that says, I'll DIY it, right? If you're that type, I love you. And I'll be able to confirm like, hey, you're on the right direction. This is what you look at this. You should think about that, blah, 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 blah. If you're the type that's like more like my wife that says, oh no, like I'm not getting YouTube certified on this. I want someone YouTube certified. Then we'll tell you like, hey, this is how we can best help you. Sometimes I helped a family save over $100,000 in college in an hour consult. Right? Maybe that's all we need.
Yeah.
Maybe you need something more comprehensive. But if you need something like dive in specific, then we might say, hey, let's hire a pro for that hour or whatever. But but like I said, if you're the DIY type, you're my kind of person. I'll happily tell you like, hey, here's the resources. Go. This is the general direction you want to be looking at, right? So I apologize if I'm not getting to all your questions. It's either because there's just so many I'm trying to keep up with, or maybe it's just so specific. We just can't realistically address it in a minute chat, if you will. Anyway, I talked enough. What about you?
No, I know we saw that we have 26, 27, 28 grads on tonight's call. You and I have personally said to each other the best way to appeal, do this the right way in the beginning.
Oh gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Nothing. What was the phrase I grew up to? Basically an ounce of prevention is way better than a pound of in this case appealing. A pound of a cure. I've had some families where I was like, maybe I helped them a little bit with an appeal, but I'm like, my God, if you would have just come to me 6 months ago, I could have done so much more. But you kind of, it's like playing poker and you showed the financial aid office all your cards and what you had hidden up your sleeve. And I'm like,
but then you try and get them to unsee it.
Yeah, I can't. We can't unsee that now. Yeah. So you did the damage. Yeah. I'll try to suture it, but it would have been better to have never done the damage.
Yeah. There's still plenty of time though to like prevent that damage, right? I mean, like we have for a junior on tonight's call, we have until
got 100 October? Just under 100 days.
Yeah.
So 99. I got 99 days and it's not one.
But so there's plenty of time. That 15-minute consult, that's a really good opportunity to know if you're on the right path or if you're on the wrong path, to know if we can help you or if you're good doing this on your own. It's something that even if you have a 2028 grad, you might have some tax planning opportunities. You might have some, asset opportunities. Take advantage of it, right? There's absolutely nothing. It'll probably be the most valuable 15 minutes you spend in 2025. There's absolutely nothing you can lose by doing it.
Yeah. I
But
mean, to give you context, and it all obviously depends. Are we talking admissions financially? But like for the admission stuff, I've been full with my juniors class of 2026 for like the last 4 months. Like,
yep.
there's one of me and there's so much of, I got to give good, helpful advice and whatnot. Um, and I know there's a few other of our pros that still have some spots, but like my sophomores, I'm about half full or maybe a little more than half full. Um, I do a lot of volunteer work locally at my church and such, and like my church kids are like starting to fill me up too, and I'm like, all right, like I got so much, there's just so much of me to go. But when it comes to financial aid, I was talking to a dad earlier today. He was like, we're a sophomore, we got tons of time. I'm like, actually,
No.
this is the best year to really make some significant changes. So it just doesn't show up anywhere on taxes and whatever. Like, he had a fairly complex situation with a business and some assets. And I'm like, don't know. Let's not wait. Let's make the moves now. So, yeah, I think one of the things I like to say is time is either going to be your greatest ally
Mhm.
or it's going to be your greatest liability. It doesn't matter how much money you have or how much influence you have, you're not changing time. So utilize it. This is probably the best advice I can give to anyone.
100%. Absolutely. Even if you have a junior, don't panic, don't lose sleep tonight. Like there's still plenty of time to make any changes that you can make and do this the right way. I always like to say that if you start early, you're strategically planning this process. If
Yeah.
you come to us or if you start thinking about this October of your student's senior year, you are in absolute crisis mode. It's too late to make any changes, and it's hard to be
We're
successful.
reacting, not
Yeah,
proacting.
yeah. Can't be successful by doing it that way. So I'm just realizing how far over time we are, but I enjoyed our presentation. Um,
Let's say, yeah, you guys have been great, like great questions I see and whatnot. And again, I wish I had fast enough fingers to get to everybody and whatnot. But yeah,
I I think that you answered a ton. You answered 33 questions. You did great.
well, you
Um,
answered some of those.
I think I answered like 4 or 5. We had a question here. How do you schedule a consultation? So before we end the presentation, I'm going to drop this one more time in the chat. You will also get a link to schedule, I believe, with the recording. So if for some reason you can't book it, go for that. But I would just say this: schedule a meeting. If you need to reschedule it, just let us know. But and please let us know if you need to reschedule. Give us a heads up. But um, just schedule a meeting, and I think you'll be very appreciative of knowing that you're doing this the right way, or unfortunately, you might be doing it the wrong way.
But
Uh,
better to learn now and correct the ship, if you will.
mhm. I any other thing like anything else you want to cover?
Well, we're going to hit information overload. So
Yeah,
again, this is recorded. You guys will get an email. You can watch it again, and all that. And then, yeah, I think we put in the chat enough times here the
yeah,
links to
yeah.
different things. So
I think we're good.
hopefully everyone has what they need. Again, don't stop. Don't listen to general advice, if you will. If use the mic app, find out what's true for you. Use that software. It is very powerful when you use it.
It's
And
free. Someone asked that before. Like 3 schools for free. Like there is no
yeah,
reason
yeah,
not to do it.
yeah, 100%.
Mhm. But all right. Thank you, everyone. We really appreciated you spending the night with us, and hope you found this really helpful.
All right, have a great night, y'all.
Bye.